Relationship fundamentals. So the specific part that I want to talk about is the transactional nature of relationships. And this is really important to understand in our healing journey in order to fix the relationship issues, to be able to do relationships in a way that works, that's beneficial for you as well as the other person. So that's what we'll be discussing today. We'll call it Relationship Fundamentals Part One. When you think of a transaction, what comes to your mind? For me, I think about going to a store, spending money, getting a receipt, and that sound of the receipt being printed is like stuck in my brain, probably because I used to work in retail as one of my first jobs when I was about 16. And I didn't want to work on the cash register, and it was because I had math anxiety. So I would try to run away from the manager whenever she was coming around because I didn't want her to say, "Hey, Roman, we need to get you trained on register." So I just wanted to work the sales floor. But eventually they caught me. And once I got up there, I realized, oh, the computer, it really does all the work for you when it comes to doing these transactions. So whatever you think of when you think of transactions, could be people handing you money, handing you a credit card, or you handing your money and credit card over. And so it's an exchange of goods and services, right? Likewise, relationships are transactional. They're also an exchange of goods and services. And all relationships are transactional. There are no exceptions to this. There's always an exchange that's happening. The thing is, it's unspoken in most cases, right? We don't sit down in every relationship and say, "Hi there, let's map out a contract and talk about how this friendship is going to go." In most cases, it sort of starts to evolve naturally. And this makes us have false notions about what relationships really are. Um, we could have notions that relationships are um, a need that like arises through like a mutual love, and we have kind of like whimsical ideas of it. And it's more like love that arises from mutual need rather than the opposite. Because when it comes to relationships, we have needs and or wants. And by the way, needs are wants. They're just wants that are more imperative, right? So we're getting our needs and wants fulfilled by these relationships on various levels. So small relationships like the person who brings you your newspaper, or the person who sells you your subscription to the meat club or whatever you're subscribed to. Those relationships are small, but there's a transaction that's happening, right? You're giving them money in exchange for goods or services. Your relationship with your therapist is also transactional. Usually you're paying them in exchange for your goods or services. Your personal trainer at the gym, your gym membership, all of these relationships are clearly transactional, but then it becomes more confusing when we think about friendships. So to understand how you're actually having a transaction in your friendships, which have maybe come about organically, we need to understand what it is we're actually exchanging. And so you have to recognize yourself as a being full of resources. Now, if you were to write down what your resources are, what do you think you might come up with? What are your personal resources, things that people find valuable about you and that they want to have an exchange with you on? Um, for many trauma survivors, they don't recognize themselves as having resources that are valuable for other people. So they're surprised to know this, but this is a very fundamental, important thing to understand about all relationships. There is an exchange of resources happening, even though we didn't talk about it. So, did you come up with some of your resources? I saw time, kindness, helpfulness. Those are examples of resources. Yeah. So, your time could be valuable to someone. Your kindness in terms of the way you make them feel, the way that you treat them, your generosity, your encouragement, your encouraging words. Those are all resources, right? In addition to that, we have our personal space as a resource. Some people want that. Some people want access to our body. Um, Literally, in a romantic relationship, there could be, an access to body for sexual purposes. There could be an access to beauty. So one of the things that you could actually like about a person is that they're good looking, or that they could like about you is that you're good looking. Maybe it's because that makes you easy on the eyes for them, or it could be that you get benefits in society as a result. Some people get free things going through society because they're just good looking. Um, but you have to be aware of the fact that you are a person not only with immense value, the highest value that a person could have, but you also have all of these things that create value, that are valuable to other people: your time, your energy, your money, your house, your car, your beauty, body, talents, your skills, your insight, your wisdom, right? And the list goes on, because in reality, there's potentially an infinite number of things that people can add, give, and exchange with one another. So now I want you to give some thought to some of your relationships. Well, let's look at the healthy ones, the ones that are good friendships. Even if it's with your own mom, or your dad, or your husband or wife. And I want you to look at where there is an exchange that's happening. And so try to analyze for yourself, what am I getting out of this relationship? And what might, and we have to guess here, what might they be getting from me in this relationship? And there we'd have to guess a little bit. But for the sake of this exercise, I want you to think and kind of jot down in your notes as I'm talking here, what might they be getting from me, and what am I getting from them in this relationship? The reason why this is fundamental to understand and to learn is because trauma survivors find themselves being victimized, used, abused in a way that becomes a pattern in their life. So it's relationship after relationship after relationship going wrong. And sometimes what happens is they find themselves feeling taken advantage of. Can you relate? Sometimes survivors find themselves feeling like they're the ones who are doing all the work, they're the ones who have done the most, and the other party doesn't seem to reciprocate. Sometimes it can feel like the other party doesn't care as much after a certain point. And trauma survivors can wonder, why is this? Why is this that I keep ending up in a relationship where I'm the one who's doing the most work or giving the most, and it's like the other people just don't really care? So analyzing the pattern that you see in these relationships going wrong, what's happening to you as the survivor is that you're not realizing that there was an exchange. It didn't register to you clearly that you had something to offer, or that you were wanting something in return. And when we have that blindness, it creates a relationship blindness, because we're not aware of what it is we actually want and need. Therefore, we don't know how to demand that. And we're also not aware that we're providing value naturally, so that can cause us to overcompensate to try to provide value for someone. Does that make sense? So we're thrown off because we're not getting this fundamental aspect of our resources and the transactional nature of relationships. It is not a bad thing. It is not an evil thing that relationships are transactional. It's okay. It can still create beautiful, loving, healthy relationships. We just need to understand that there needs to be an even exchange. Now, when I say an even exchange, I don't mean it has to be a clear on paper tit for tat. What it means is that you need to feel in your relationship equally satisfied to how they feel. And that should be your concern also, that they're feeling equally satisfied to how you feel. Does that make sense? Whenever you engage in a relationship that's uneven, It's because you feel that you're getting more, or you feel that they're getting more, or not giving enough, right? Or you feel that you're not giving enough. And this creates that feeling of imbalance in the relationship. And that's a really unsettling feeling, isn't it? And so maybe you've been there. Maybe you've been the person who was giving a lot and then started to feel resentful that you weren't getting anything in return. In this case, does that mean that the other person failed you? Or could it be that we ourselves have failed if we find ourselves giving a lot but we're not getting something in return? What happens when we do that, it's called covert contracts. And that is actually a fault of our own. When we're giving a lot in relationships and we're hoping for something in return, we are engaging in what's called a covert contract, which means that you have expectations of an exchange. You have expectations of what you're supposed to be getting out of the relationship, but you never actually communicated it. You never told them, hey, this is what I want in the relationship. And when you have those expectations, but you don't communicate the expectations, that's covert contracts. It's unhealthy behavior, and it will sabotage, it will ruin your relationships. When you have expectations, but you don't communicate the expectations, when you have wants and needs, but you don't tell the other party the wants and needs, that is covert contracts, and it's toxic. It's ruining your relationships. But Roman, shouldn't they just know? Isn't it just common sense that if I pick up your kids and do your laundry and run errands for you, that you'll be there for me when I need something? The answer is no. The thinking is flawed because it's the fallacy of universality, which is the idea that the way that you want a relationship to go, everyone wants it the same way and everyone has the same needs, same expectations. It's universality. That is false. I know, I understand why it seems like common sense to you. It seems to you like everyone should be on the same page here. We're all going to do it this way because this is what seems like decency to you. But you cannot assume that because you did someone a favor, that now they owe you when you never told them that you wanted something in exchange. If you're ready to break out of the maladaptive pattern of covert contracts, you need just open your mouth and tell people what you want. That shatters the maladaptive pattern of covert contracts. The problem is we think we're wrong by telling people what to do, what we want from them, but that's the right thing to do. The wrong thing to do is to not tell people and just be mad and resentful that you're not getting anything back or that they're not there for you when you feel like they should be based on what you did for them. Does that make sense? Again, there are no universal rules for how a relationship must go. It is up to you as the individual. It is your job to come to the table, the negotiation table, so to speak, and text them, call them, speak to them in person, do something, send them an email that lets them know what you want from them. And the moment you feel like they're asking too much, it is your responsibility to stop and say, I feel like you're asking too much. Or I feel like we're going to have to renegotiate our deal and I need more out of you if I'm going to start doing more for you. Does that make sense? But Roman, whatever happened to just doing things out of the goodness of your heart? I thought we just do things out of the goodness of our heart. And then, other people should be able to do things for us out of the goodness of their heart. What you're talking about makes relationships sound so dark and sterile. Doing something out of the goodness of your heart, unselfishly, means that you don't expect anything in return. If you don't expect anything in return, then there's no transaction. And if there's no transaction, then it's not a relationship. There's nothing about giving and doing things out of the goodness of your heart that has anything to do with relationships. So it's literally a whole separate subject. I encourage you, be generous and do things out of the goodness of your heart. But that doesn't create a relationship. And if you want it to create a relationship, then it's transactional. And you're engaging in covert contracts unless you're clear to them of what you're expecting. Does that make sense? To give you an example, if I have a widow that lives in my apartment building and I say to myself, I would like to, out of the goodness of my heart, cook a meal and provide that for the widow. So I cook up this nice meal and I take it over and I give it to this widow and she says, thank you so much. Here, let me give you some money. And then I say, no, no, no. I just wanted to do this for you out of the goodness of my heart. She says, well, come in. Maybe I can give you some clothes that I'm knitting. And I say, no, no, I don't want anything, right? If I'm really doing it out of the goodness of my heart, then I literally do not want anything. So there will be no expectation that she comes to my aid later. There is no expectation that she calls me or sends me a thank you card. Nothing. Because I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart. That has nothing to do with relationships. Because I did not just start a relationship with her. I didn't want to. The only thing I wanted to do was something out of the goodness of my heart. Does that make sense? It's a whole separate thing. When we talk about relationships, we're talking about wanting something from the other person. Maybe a favor, maybe companionship, maybe an exchange of goods, services, energy, time, personal space. Maybe you're just hoping that you're going to be able to call on them later for something. It doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that if there's a transaction, then there's a relationship. If there's a relationship, there is a transaction. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. It doesn't mean you can't do things out of the goodness of your heart for someone that you're in a relationship with. It just means that has nothing to do with the relationship. You're just doing that out of the goodness of your heart. It's a separate subject. So isn't that what we're supposed to do in relationships? Aren't we just supposed to be giving out of the goodness of our heart and then they just give out of the goodness of their heart? No, that has not been working. How has that worked for you so far? Walking around with this covert contract expectation that if you're really nice to people, and if you're really kind and you're really giving and you're really generous, then maybe they'll be there for you. How is that working? It doesn't work. It leads to all types of frustration on your part. So I need you to understand this fundamental truth that you are full of resources, abundant in them. You have so much to offer. And people want what you have to offer. But understand that you are responsible for making sure that in every relationship, you're getting something out of it. You're responsible for that, not the other person, because the other person doesn't know what you want from them. You have to actually tell them. Does that make sense? So look at your adult kids. It's the same thing. I know that they were your children once and you had to just care for them at one time. But now that they're adults, if we're going to continue the relationship, you have to be getting something out of the relationship. So maybe for you, just the joy of seeing them, hearing from them, that's what you get out of it. Well, that's great. But don't be afraid to tell them, hey, I expect a phone call every once in a while, or I expect you to come once a year for dinner, or whatever your expectation of the relationship is. If there's something you're giving to them, you have the right to demand to let people know what you expect in return. And it is your job to communicate it. It's not wrong. It doesn't take away the beauty. We actually appreciate knowing what people want from us. Don't you? Do you prefer relationships where people are covert and they don't really tell you what they want from you, but they just keep doing things for you, but they don't tell you what they want? Do you prefer that? Of course not. And so don't be that. Don't be that towards other people. Be upfront, direct and honest. Tell them. It may happen later in the relationship. It may not be right away, but at some point, if you get a feeling that this is unfair, either they're asking too much or they're not giving enough, or you're giving too much, make a change. Either change the action or go ahead and speak up. Does that make sense? This will lead you to more bountiful, more healthy, more wonderful relationships. This will lead you to more secure connection, more secure attachment. When you realize these relationships are not magical, mystical bonds that I need to hold on to when I have one friend. I just need to hold on to that friend. Or some of you will get into an argument with your friend. You're not doing enough for me. How come you never called me? How come you didn't let me know that you were going on a trip? How come you didn't? They don't owe you anything unless you demanded that up front. Unless you told them, hey, now that we're in this relationship, I expect you to call me on these days, or I expect you to let me know if you're going on a trip. Okay. Then in that case, then you can raise a problem. But it's not okay for you to be just giving, 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 and then one day get mad that they just didn't give to you. How are they supposed to know what you want? They don't know what you want. Why wouldn't they assume that you're happy in the relationship, giving to them and serving their needs? Why wouldn't they assume that? They don't know. They may think that you just like a little attention from them or whatever they think they're giving. They may think that that's it. So you can't assume that they know the problem and the issue. And all. No, you have to communicate. Does that make sense? You have to communicate. Again, I am getting you to the path of what you want. You want the lovey-dovey, the bountiful, happy relationships. You want people to do things for you, to be there for you, to value you. The path to getting there is to recognize your value and to be able to speak up for your needs. Stop just giving and hoping. Don't do that. Don't just give and hope. Don't get upset that they don't already know, that they're not already reading your mind. How come they don't see? How come they don't understand what I'm giving to them? What is the problem? Why are they so dumb? For you to believe that everyone sees the world like you, that's immature thinking. For you to believe that everyone else out there understands how you feel and knows what you need before you tell them, that's immature thinking. We have to recognize people cannot read our minds. Say that. Say it out loud right now. People cannot read my mind. I also cannot read their mind. So how do you know that you haven't also been the party of a relationship that was taking too much, where the other person felt like they were breaking their back for you and doing so much for you and you didn't give them anything? How do you know that you haven't been, you don't know that you haven't been that party in a relationship until someone tells you? We can think that we are crushing it in a relationship. Go ahead. If you're a husband, ask your wife if you're crushing it. You might be surprised. You might have your feelings hurt by what you find out. And we can think that, oh, I am crushing it in this relationship. I am such a good mom, husband, wife, son. And then go ask and find out. And if they're honest with you, you might find out that you're not as killing it and as amazing as you thought you were. Okay, so we got this perception of ourselves, this story that we tell where we're the hero of our story. To a degree, that's not terrible, but at least recognize that other people don't know how you feel. And so speak up. If you want more from the relationship, speak up. Let them know. So as an exercise right now, I want you to write down some of the things that you're getting out of your relationship with a buddy, a friend, a healthy relationship that you have, a healthy connection, if you have one. Not all of us have a healthy connection right now. but take anyone and just write down the things that you're getting out of the relationship. And this helps you to become more aware of the transactional nature. We don't know exactly what they're getting. I did this exercise myself. And again, I don't have my notes in front of me, but I was thinking about a buddy of mine. And I was like, man, what do I get out of this relationship? And I actually came up with quite a list. One of the things is that he he does the majority of the work for maintaining contact. So that makes it extremely easy for me to have a relationship with him. So there's no burden on me. There's no burden of expectation because of him doing the work of maintaining the contact. He also is attractive. He has good social connections in our friend group. Because of his social status in the friend group, it makes it easy for me to get invitations because I'm his friend. So I'm invited to everything because he's kind of like a leader in the friend group. Um, he's we play sports together. He's a great teammate. He's skilled and unselfish. So I love playing with him and maintaining a connection just to have that good teammate. Totally worth it. Um, and then basic, companionships and kind of like that feeling you get when you're talking to someone about your experience and then they relate, they see it from your perspective and so on, and they share their perspective. And so there's that exchange, and that's valuable as well, the exchange of ideas. And I think probably, and I just have to guess, he might see something in me. Maybe he feels I'm a good teammate too. Maybe he likes hanging out with me. Maybe he appreciates my wisdom, my experience, my knowledge. Maybe he sees me as intelligent. Um, so whatever it is, uh, there is an exchange going on. And what happens when these things start getting taken away is a relationship can quickly become one-sided and abusive. So if I were to start to lose things and some of the things I like about him start to disappear, and meanwhile, I'm giving all of the things that he's getting out of me, I'm now in an uneven exchange. And this is what narcissists subtly do to you. And this is how you found yourself in your relationship with your narcissist. There was that uneven exchange at a certain point. And so instead of wondering, how come people don't know when they're taking too much? Focus your mind on, why don't I notice? Why aren't I noticing when the relationship's becoming uneven early on? And how can I start paying more attention? So let's focus on what we need to do to be very cognizant of these relationships and know how to disconnect or speak up right away when we notice they're becoming uneven.